Ok, señores, esta es otra edición especial de la Biblia completa. Hoy se encuentra con nosotros un gran amigo. Lo conocí a través de las redes sociales, específicamente Twitter, y ha resultado, de hecho, ser, una buena conexión en el sentido de amistad, de estar en contacto. Chip es profesor universitario en Carolina del Norte y también ha estado enseñando aquí en República Dominicana en uno de los seminarios bautistas. Es escritor de este fabuloso libro. En español sería Joyas exegéticas desde el hebreo bíblico, súper recomendable para estudiantes que están iniciando los estudios del hebreo o que han pasado el primer año o lo que llamamos el hebreo básico. Son capítulos cortos, fáciles de leer, sin transliteración, que para mí es sumamente importante porque ayuda en la lectura. Va directamente desde el versículo en hebreo, junto a otras cosas que hace. Chip también es discípulo de Cristo, así que nos es un gran placer tenerlo el día de hoy. Hi, Chip. How are you today?
Hola, ¿cómo estás? Muy bien.
Oh,
I'm
todo
doing
bien,
well.
gracias a Dios.
Exactly.
How are things in the States right now?
Yeah, we're doing well. We're hanging in there, trying to abide by all the regulations and all the very interesting moment that we find ourselves in. I know that you also are, trying to do that as well. So, but my family and our people here are doing well. So we're happy with that.
That's really good. Can you tell us a little bit about you so people can know you better? I introduced you a little bit, but
Yeah, exactly. As you said, I'm a professor of the Hebrew Bible and Old Testament in North Carolina at Southeastern Seminary, and I've been here for about 7 years, teaching a wide range of languages and classes on the Old Testament and how best to understand it. So that's my specialty. I've spent a number of years with different types of training on both Hebrew language, Bible, ancient Near East, other languages, archaeology, et cetera, et cetera. So lots of things that I know you're very interested in, and these are things that interest me personally as well. I live here. I'm in here in my office on campus, but I live just a few blocks away with my wife and our small little dog. So that's where we are, and so we are trying to keep our life kind of close here, and trying to do what we can in the meantime. So serve the Lord and do what He calls us to do each day. So that's, I don't know, a little bit about me.
nice. Okay. And you're expecting a child, so we're praying for
That's
that and we're
that's
happy
right.
for you.
Thank you so much. Yes, very excited about that. Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
How did you get involved into biblical languages and in biblical studies?
When I was at university, I started taking Greek, and I started taking what they call Attic Greek or Classical Greek. And I did that because I was interested in the Bible. I grew up in church. Both my parents are believers, and so I knew something about the Bible. I knew the Bible was written not in English or in Spanish, but rather in Greek and Hebrew and Aramaic. And I thought, well, this must be important to know something about this. And so I think I was always interested in sort of ancient things and history, and realizing that people.
What was your major at the time?
I was a math major, actually. So I
Oh,
was doing
okay.
mathematics, and so I wasn't really,
That is quite a change, huh?
yeah, it was quite a bit different. I had some language. It's funny. I had language requirements, and I'd taken Espanol in high school, and so I had done some years of study there, and so I could have continued that. But I really got interested in this sort of ancient culture, ancient time, and then ancient languages, and so I started learning. And I wasn't the best student when it came to languages. I'm not. I don't pick them up very easily. It just wasn't something I was terribly good at. But I sort of was motivated. I said, I really want to do this. And then as I started to learn, I started realizing, wow, this world that is unlocking by learning these languages is something entirely different. It's like if you live all your life in Santo Domingo and you only ever talk to your neighbors, but then you get on the plane and you fly to I don't know, you fly to Washington D.C., or you fly to Paris, or you fly to Johannesburg, or whatever. You go someplace else, and you realize, wait a second, people don't speak the same language. They don't communicate in the same way. Their gestures mean something different. They think about the world in different ways. And I started realizing, wow, people in the Bible don't look at the world the same way I do. They don't see the world the same way. They don't express the things that they feel. Now, are people all the same? Absolutely. But they're also very, very different from place to place and from time to time. And so that became sort of my entry point into learning about the ancient world and ancient people. And then I realized, wow, if I want to do this, then I've got to learn language and events and history and culture and time and sociology. And then the world just became kind of, it just opened up so many options for me. So Greek really was my first love in that. And then from university, I decided to go to seminary and get training. I thought that the Lord had called me into some type of ministry, maybe pastoral ministry was one possibility. And so at seminary, I did more Greek, and then I started taking Hebrew for the first time. And I realized that I loved Hebrew maybe just as much, if not more, than Greek. And so, yeah, exactly. It moved, right? There's a few of us out there, right, that would say,
Yeah,
hey, this is really exciting,
a
And I think
few,
one of the,
but we are
yeah,
here.
that's right. I think it makes sense if you start thinking about it, because I think a lot of Christians feel somewhat familiar with the New Testament. We feel like we know something about it. We maybe have heard about the Greeks and the Romans, and we know something about the ancient Mediterranean. Even maybe we've even visited there, but very few of us have spent too much time in the Middle East, and we see it as maybe more foreign and more strange and more alien in a way. And so if we're going to spend our lives working through something and dedicating ourselves to understanding God and understanding the way in which he's spoken to us through his word, then we probably need to know a little bit about all of these things. And so that kind of motivated me to say, if I had to choose Greek or Hebrew, which one do I know least about? And I think there's kind of two different ways of looking at the world. Some people say, well, what do I know about? I'm just going to do that. I'm always going to do that. Right. So that's some people that works really well. But then there's other people, I think probably you're one of these people, Fausto, who say, I don't know anything about this. And so I want to learn about that. I want to learn about that. And that's kind of the way I am too. I said, I really don't know much about this Old Testament thing. It's a little bit weird. It's a little bit scary, maybe. Do I really want to know what's going on there? There's a lot of things I don't really like, maybe. And so what do I do with that? Well, I could either ignore it and act like it's not important, or I could engage with it. I could go deep as far as I can and learn in that. And that's the option that I chose. So.
Nice, and it's good that it's surprising your story, because just a few people jump from Greek to Hebrew. There's something that I call the virtual Marcionism, and
Right.
where there's a lot of focus on Greek and New Testament, which is not bad, but we have to understand that there's continuity. There's a connection between Old and New Testament, and we need the shadow of the sins to know the importance of this thing, as Hebrews call it in the New Testament. We recently finished in this podcast, La Biblia Completa, what we call the wisdom literature. Sorry for my English. That is Job, Proverbs, and this may seem a weird question, but why these are wisdom? Why we call these books wisdoms? Is not the rest of the Bible wisdoms?
Yeah, I mean, that's, I'm sure you know this, but that's a big question. In fact, there was a book published just maybe 2 years ago by a professor of Hebrew who's now at Beeson Divinity School, or Beeson Sanford University in Alabama. His name is Will Kynes, Kynes. And he wrote a book called, I just lost the name of it, something like I've forgotten the name of it, but it's basically questioning whether wisdom is a proper category for
Hmm.
these books. And so he brought the question up. He asked the question, where did that idea come from? Is it an ancient idea? Is it not? And then what are the boundaries on what we think about with this wisdom literature?
Interesting.
And so, and he traced it back to a German guy by the name of Bruch, Bruch, um, and from the 1800s, and said this is where this idea came from, that these books are wisdom literature. Now, if we look at the books themselves, we can see that there's discussion of wisdom in them, but there's also discussion of wisdom in other places, like you mentioned. And there's discussions in these books that don't maybe fit with what we think of as wisdom. And so, in fact, we might even question some of the wisdom that's in these books, right?
It's
Some
more
of it might.
common sense than.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the question too: is how much of this wisdom is just what everyone knows, and how much of this wisdom is biblical wisdom, or maybe is specific to the Bible, right? How much of this is shared wisdom? How much of this is just things that you can observe and know to be true? Anyway, all this to say is that I think this idea of wisdom literature is a great question. We group these together, and we kind of think about wisdom in this moment when we look at it. But there's lots of wisdom text other places. We can think of maybe something like Psalm 1, where that's definitely a wisdom type passage. It sounds very much like wisdom. Maybe we can even think about something like Genesis 2 and 3, and we think of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, right? And this idea of wisdom comes into play there as well. And so we have a lot of different ideas about what wisdom is, and then how do these books teach us about wisdom. So I think what I would say is that wisdom is a big category in the Bible. Maybe something like righteousness or love of God, or even sin on a negative level, right? There's a big category in the Bible that gets picked up in many different places, but then in some places it's concentrated more. And so we can maybe find out more about wisdom in certain books or certain stories. That's how I would want to think about wisdom, more than thinking about, okay, this is now a wisdom book, and now this is also a wisdom book, and that somehow is different than these other books over here, which are not wisdom. There's something else. I think that can cause some confusion. So is it helpful? Absolutely. It focuses us on these sorts of things. But we also need to see that wisdom is a bigger category than what we just are seeing right here in Proverbs, Job, and Ecclesiastes.
And I think a good question would be, what is wisdom in the Bible? Because as you say, something that is interesting for us that study the languages of the Bible is the cultural distance that we have from the biblical men and women, which is like when you say the biblical men and women is not just people in the same period. It's like people in hundreds of years. So it's people that is changing. So categories are changing at the same time. So what is wisdom in the Bible? Will be a good a good definition to say.
Yeah, that's. I think that is a huge question. We could probably spend the next 3 hours
It is.
talking about different things of wisdom and never really get to a solid definition, right? And so, but maybe I can talk a little about what wisdom is by talking about what wisdom is not, and then maybe that can help us get to where wisdom is or have a better understanding. So, in our moment, I think in Western in the Western mindset, wisdom a lot of times is thought of as information and knowledge, right? We might say that person has a lot of wisdom, and meaning that they have a lot of things in their head. They're really smart, we might think, right? But we also know really smart people who aren't wise, right? So like
A
some of the
lot.
smartest people I know, like they don't know like to look both ways before going across the street. They don't know to behave in certain ways in a social context, right? And so we've tried to say that there's a wisdom which is a book. There's an expression book smarts in
Mm-hmm.
English, and then there's like an emotional smartness, right, and a relational smartness, and we know different people in our lives who are really good at being able to connect with people and speak to them and speak to their needs or identify their needs, right? And it's interesting that people who have a lot of information in their heads oftentimes are not the same people that can emotionally connect with other people, you see. So on the one hand, we can talk about wisdom as having information or having knowledge, but it's not merely that. That's only a part of what wisdom is, okay? In Hebrew, the word wisdom can also mean skills, and having skills. And so it's not just about information, but it's also about what you do with that information as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so information it has a wide range. We can know a lot of different things about a lot of different things. But then also we have to ask the question of not just what do we know, but then what do we do with that knowledge? And I think that's the other another side of wisdom that oftentimes we don't think about. So what is it that I know, and then what is it that I do with the information that I know? And I think the combination of those two things gets us closer to what is wisdom.
Yeah.
Do you have
So,
other thoughts on that? Yeah.
so what you say is like is the capacity with the information that you have to take good decisions in life. That will be, in some ways, a good definition of wisdom from the Bible perspective.
Absolutely, because that combines, I think, the knowledge part and the doing part, right? And yeah, making decisions, but also just sometimes not making a decision, right? Because sometimes the most wise course of action is not to do anything, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, so I think that's exactly. I like that. I like that. That's very good. So the capacity to make wise choices or to make the best choices. Now, of course, we got to ask all kinds of questions like, what does it mean to be the best and that sort of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's also another aspect to wisdom as well. It's not just having information, not just about knowing what to do with it, but then asking what is the purpose of what I'm doing. Okay. And that's where wisdom now, so you have knowledge and that intersects with wisdom, and then wisdom intersects with, I think, what I would say is righteousness. And so this is where, in my mind, biblical wisdom comes into play. And so we have information, we have knowing what to do with it, and then we have a connection with righteousness. Or maybe you think about overlapping circles. Here's the circle of wisdom. We have information, it intersects, and over here we have righteousness intersects, right? And this is where the point of what is the end or the goal of our decision. What makes a decision the best decision, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think from a biblical standpoint, a righteousness standpoint, we always have to be asking, is our decision the best for us? Because you might say, hey, that guy's really wise. He made a lot of money because he had good information. He did good things, and then he made a lot of money. Okay, that's wonderful. I mean, we can talk about the good and bad of that. But then what did he do with all that money?
Mm-hmm.
Is he just sitting on it and not doing anything? Is he actually making money and hurting other people by doing that? Or is he helping other people by doing that, right? And I think that's then the side of righteousness that comes into play, right? And we could talk about righteousness as advantaging others to my own disadvantage, right? That in some ways is what righteousness is building up others, even if it hurts me to some degree, right? And so you would say, wait a second, you're making a decision that hurts you. That should be an unwise decision. But that's not what the Bible says, right? Mm-hmm. The Bible says that actually that can be a wise decision, right? In this. So I think there's a lot of different layers. There's a lot of different outworkings for what biblical wisdom is. And it's not as easy as just saying, hey, this is wisdom. It's one of those things that I think in some ways when you see it, you know it, but maybe you can't describe it, right? And that's, yeah. I think that's really true.
Yeah, and you talk about information that is, for us today, is people are looking for information as crazy, specifically in a time where you have information in your fingers, like you just go Google it or whatever. It's not like other times. I when I talk with other pastors friends, I say it's not as 20 or 25 years ago where the pastors have the information because he have the books.
Yeah.
Now you have the people that can go and to the same source, and they actually can go to other sources. They can compare, and they can in some ways make their own mind. So it is a crazy time in a good way, because that push people to study more the Bible and the sources and the culture around. And in the wisdom books, I see the same now that you talk about information. You have these people confronting the information that they have with what they're living. You have Job, that sometimes is just reduced to suffering, but they have this theological confrontation of friends that actually in some ways they express proverbs almost
Yeah.
verbatim, you say
Yep.
in English, which is common information. And Job says, no, it doesn't seem like it, because because I know myself, and I'm not the type of people you're saying. So I don't know why this is happening to me. So there's confrontation of information information there, which is totally interesting. So at the same time, these people that have to take good decision, and those decisions go connected with righteousness, the information that they have is important too.
Yeah, and I think that brings up a very interesting question too. Is that you mentioned, I thought it was interesting in your, and what you were saying is you mentioned the difference between wisdom and like a proverb, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
we're a wisdom or a wisdom saying, right? And so you
Mm-hmm.
said that they said as proverb, but he knew that wasn't true, right? And I think that's an interesting thing
Yeah.
about proverbs, is that in some way, and some people give the definition of a proverb in this way. They say it's wisdom, but it's giving a general truth, right, about how the world generally works, right? And so, and what's interesting about any general truth is that there are always exceptions to these truths, right? It doesn't always work that way, but as a general rule, things work a certain way. And I think Job is the great example to that, And for me, as you think about these books, and one of the reasons why I like thinking about them together is because they do sort of serve as a point and counterpoint to one another, right? And wisdom does this, right? Wisdom is not law. Wisdom is different, right? Law says this is right and this is wrong. Wisdom says this is right and this is right. Now you have to figure out when is it right and wrong,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's the difference between. And I think for some of us, we love that. We are like, oh yeah, Proverbs. That's my jam. That's what I like. I really can get on board with that because I realize that life is complicated. And but on the other hand, some people say, no, I really like law because I like that very stringent sort of box. And tell me what's right, Pastor. Tell me what's right, brother, and help me know what to do. And so, and sometimes we need a very clear line and say, hey, do not cross this, otherwise you're going to be in trouble. That's really good, right? We use that with our children, right? We say, here's the line, don't go past it, you'll get hit by the car if you go there, right? There's maybe they'll see you and it won't happen, but there's the clear line. If you stay on this side, you'll be protected, I guarantee it, right? But then other times we say, no, stay by my side, right? Walk close beside me and you'll be safe, right? There is no more line left. You can't just say, oh, don't go 3 feet, because what happens when you cross the street? No, the child needs to stay near beside you, right? And for me, wisdom works in that way. Wisdom is the Lord saying to us, hey, here's the way I'm thinking. Here's the way I built this place. Here's the way this place works. And now stay close beside me. And rules are great. Walls are great, and they're effective. But there also is a place for going out into the world and realizing that life is very difficult, and the journey that we're all on is not one of rigid, absolute boundaries in all things. And this is where wisdom comes in play, right? So when we go to the Bible, we see the book of Proverbs where Solomon's speaking to his son and saying, hey, do these things, son, and it will go well for you. But then we see those almost exact proverbs being used and given to Job, and Job says, no, that doesn't work for me because I'm the exception to those general principles. And so I think it's a great moment for us to hear that point, counterpoint, and see that life is a very complicated thing. And easy answers are just that, easy, but
Mm-hmm.
not always right.
Yeah. And what is your favorite from the wisdom books?
Oh wow, my favorite? I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I think this might, your viewers might turn this off when I say this, but to be honest, I love I love Ecclesiastes. I find great comfort in realizing that in the Bible, there's a book that talks about how everything is vain in some ways, right? The excess of life leads to disenchantment, to disillusionment, to uncertainty and bad health, right? We see that all these, that's what the preacher in Ecclesiastes is
Mhm.
saying. He's saying if you take anything that the world says is the right and good and true thing, whether that be pleasure, riches, power, if you take any one of those things and you make one of those things the ultimate thing, the thing that drives everything, things that tells me what the best wisdom is, then what happens is when you achieve that, you will achieve disillusionment and not happiness. And I find great comfort in a book, in an ancient book of the Bible that tells us so much about our humanity that many of us, you get on Twitter, you get on Instagram, you get on TikTok, and people are driving after money, power, influence, happiness, fulfillment, right? That's all they want. They're just looking for those things. And this book of the Bible shows that the even putting that as the ultimate end of our search is the thing that's going to disillusion us. Because if we achieve that thing that we think we want, we realize that it cannot satisfy our deepest needs, right? Ultimately, the true search that the author of Ecclesiastes sums up at the very end of the book, right? The true search is the search for God. And
Mhm.
only in the searching for God can we really attain true happiness in life, not through the search for happiness. And I think this is where our culture, our moment, is really confused and unwise in how we think about the world.
Yeah, and it's something that you can actually, because of the social network and everybody exposing their life and everything, you can see the choking reality of what the book is giving in conclusion. You have people like Anthony Bourdain,
Mm,
and you watch his shows, and you think this guy is living to the full, like he's
mm,
enjoying his life, going around, eating everywhere, traveling the
mm,
world, but
mm.
all is vain. And there's thousands of examples like him. He's probably someone that exposed his life so much that we have to talk about him. There's a lot of people like that, and it's amazing how ancient wisdom is telling you that before social network, before the end of privacy.
Yeah.
And I don't know how we can call this time. How is now that we are in front of someone that have read this book in Hebrew, and probably in Greek too. How is the language in these books different than the language of the rest of the Bible?
Yeah, I mean that's a good question. I think you can approach that from a lot of different ways. I think maybe the biggest thing that we can see different is the poetic nature of these books, right? Where if we think about genre of literature, and we think about the way in which different literature is formed, we see that as we read Proverbs, it sounds a lot different than most of the rest of the books of the Bible. I mean, especially it sounds so much different than like the book of Romans, and it sounds completely different than the stories in the books of Samuel. And so, and a lot of that is this poetic nature of these books. And when we talk about poetry, we're not talking about poetry like the songs that we sing, right, with the
Mhm.
radio or on our MP3 players or whatever, like that, or on Spotify, right? That's not what we're talking about with poetry. Poetry is not rhyming and rhythm primarily, which is where our poetry plays, right? Poetry, as you well know, has to do more with saying things in as few words possible and lining it up amongst parallel or similar clauses and phrases, right? So you say two things that are very similar to one another in order to talk about something that's even bigger. So you use these sort of metaphors and these ways of speaking in order to get across something bigger. And what it does is they paint little pictures of of something grander, right? Something that's true. Mm-hmm. And so you put these little small phrases together, and your mind starts saying, "Oh, I never saw the connection between this and this, but now they're being brought together." One of my favorite professors would always say, "It's like listening to a left and right stereo." Or think about your stereo system if you have one of those fancy systems in your home or in the movie theater, right, where you have all the different speakers. In some ways, poetic language is like that. It's giving you two different, very similar, but two different ways of thinking about things, and you put them together, and now it all kind of makes sense. And so I think that's the way poetry works. Quite a bit different than a letter of Paul saying, "Think about it this way," or a law that says do this, don't do that, or a story which says, "Hey, come into this story and think about these characters and think about how they are important and how you identify with them, what you can learn from them." Right? Poetry does something different. It excites the mind. It brings you into a scene. It creates this world that you are somewhat surprised by. I love this little example because most people don't know of it. But if you go to Proverbs chapter 20, Proverbs chapter 20, verse 14, this is a very interesting little image here using poetry, which I think is kind of fun and also interesting altogether in one. Do you want to read that in Espanol or in English? And then I can read it here as we go, but you want to read that, what you have there in front of you?
Dice, el comprador regatea el precio diciendo, esto no vale nada, y después se jacta por una buena compra.
Right. So that was 20 verse 14?
Yes.
Okay. So
it
the
sounds
first
different in Spanish?
No, it sounds a little different, but I think it still works. So the first image, how would you describe the first image that they're presenting there?
Is someone that is actually fighting for the price of something?
Yeah, exactly. So we all know this experience, right? We go to the market and we're kind of fighting over price, right? Bad. No, this isn't a good price. I want a better price, right? We all do this, right?
Yeah.
Some cultures do it more than others, but we all do this. We say, no, that's not a good price. Isn't a good price, right? So that's the first scene we get, and automatically with what is it? It's like 4 or 5 words in Hebrew. With 4 or 5 words, you're transported into an experience that all of us have, right? All of us know this experience in life where we are engaging with buying and selling items, right? And someone's saying, no, not a good price, not a good price. But then what happens in the second line, then the second image?
In the second line, he says, like, he actually brag about wow, I bought something great.
I got
I
it.
got
Right?
it.
He got away. And I'm like, hey, I got it. I got a good deal, right? And so, so you see these two images. One is the image of the arguing over the price, and the second one is the image of the person going away and being happy with it, right? Happy with what they got for the price, right? And this is, I think this is a great example of this literature where there's this whole world that unlocks in our mind over this very short passage, right? And so you say, well, what is this all about? Well, one, it's about thinking about what buying and selling in a marketplace, right? But it's not telling us what rules we should have, what rules we can't have. It's not saying that, right? It's saying that this is a human experience where two people come together and we disagree about what the best thing is for both of us, right? And at the end of the day, the best thing for both of us in this situation is that we both say that we got a bad deal, right? I mean, right? We both have to give something, yeah. Right? You say the price is this, I say this, we come back in between and we say, okay, I guess we'll go, maybe, can no better? No, okay, I guess we'll take that. It's not good, not a good deal, but I don't want to go over there and get it. We have this whole thing, right? But then what we've done though, is we've realized that actually there's a medium between you and me, right? In this case of buying something, where we can actually both agree to say, hey, we both may not get what we want, but we both have gotten what we really wanted. Mm-hmm. We both have gone away happy. And I think that's a really interesting way of thinking about life, right? Is that oftentimes we don't just give in to someone else. We don't just expect someone else to give in to me, but we actually have to come to some type of mediating position between us. And in that, we can go away and be pleased with reality. We can be pleased with our purchase. We can be pleased with this social reality, right? And we go, well, yeah, that's exactly right. But I never really thought about it that way. And so
Yeah.
I just love this little passage because it reminds us
And
it's
it's
so human.
amazing that you go through it and you don't think like, oh wow, this is exactly like today.
Right? Exactly. Exactly.
There's a great
Yeah, it's
connection
so
because I
true.
do that every time I go to the market, especially especially traveling and going to,
Yeah.
to places.
Yeah.
No. I don't. No. That's not where they sell that for
Yeah,
a
that's right.
lesser
Got a
price.
better deal up the road. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. And so, but yet here's a passage in the Bible that's very relatable, right? It also tells us it's not just about how to do commerce, right? It's not just about telling us how to get the best deal. It's really telling us something about who we are as people.
Hmm.
Because when we come together as people, well, we never see things the same way, right? We're always coming from our own perspective. But if we're really going to deal, if we're each going to go away happy, we need to realize that each person has a valuable thing to say and a valuable position from which they're coming from. And oftentimes the best resolution to a problem is to come to a mediating position, right? Now we can all complain about that. We could say, I don't really want to do that. That's politics or whatever it is, right? We say these things, right?
Mhm.
But when we go away, we realize, yeah, hey, I had to give more than I wanted to, but I got what I wanted more. And I think there's something really true and right about this in our human experience.
Yeah, and we know that the biblical writers, they didn't write in isolation. How are these books connected with the wisdom literature that surrounds them? Or are
Yeah,
they
yeah.
different in some ways, or are there similarities between the wisdom in ancient Israel and the wisdom in other ancient people that live at the same time?
Yeah, there's great overlap in the wisdom from ancient people and in the Bible. So much so that there's this group of text in Proverbs um, that's um, that's in the latter parts of the Proverbs, which looks very, very similar to a group of ancient texts that we know from this guy called Amenemope. So this is Proverbs 22 through 22:17 through 24:22. And if you compare it side by side with the wisdom, what's called the wisdom of Memope, which was an ancient Egyptian literature wisdom text, we see that there's actually quite a bit of similarities. I mean, you can read them side by side on the internet, you can pull them up and you see how similar they are. It's incredible what's going on there. So much so that even at one point, we've been able to understand the biblical text better because we can read that other text. So this is a moment where actually, because we understood the other text, we actually can understand the biblical text a little bit better in this one proverb. But anyway, what we see that it's interesting. On the one hand, we might go, wait a second, how can ancient literature be informed the Bible? But if you think about it, if you think about wisdom, what is it, and what is it doing? We can understand that this is possibly the way it is, right? In fact, we probably have a lot of proverbs. You could probably quote a lot of proverbs maybe your mom taught you, your grandmother taught you, and you're like, these proverbs are really true. They work out really well. Now they're not in the Bible, but they are still true, right? So there's a lot of truth in the world around us that's available for people who watch and listen. And in fact, we see that with the biblical text too, because remember Solomon has said that to go to the east and go to the West and comparing his
Mhm.
wisdom, right? He's seeing these other voices. He's listening to these other sages, these other wise people, and then he's responding with, "Hey, yeah, that is true wisdom." And now let me bring that into my thinking. Now
Mhm.
that's true wisdom. Let's bring them into my thinking. Now let me wrap this all up in the thinking of the Bible. Now, having said that there are a lot of similarities and even clear overlaps between ancient wisdom and biblical literature, there is one overarching principle in biblical literature that we shouldn't forget. Biblical literature is different, or biblical wisdom is different, particularly biblical proverbs, because biblical proverbs always filter their knowledge through the lens of a worldview that has God at the center, or more particularly has Yahweh at the center, the God of the Israelites, right? We all are very familiar at this point in our reality that we all see the world through different glasses, right? I mean, you and I both wear glasses, right? So when I have my glasses on versus have my glasses off, if I have my shades on, if I have my sunglasses off, right? If I have a tinted glasses, right? We understand that glasses allow us to see the world in a different way than we naturally will see it. And what we realize today, I think, in good ways and bad ways, is that everyone has their own set of glasses on, right? It's not that you can say, well, I don't have to wear glasses because I see the world, just the way it is. No. We're seeing the world through our culture, through our language, through our experiences, through our family, through what we've learned. All these things are affecting us, right? And the same thing is true about the wisdom literature in the Bible. Except I would say that what it's trying to do is not just see what the world is like, but see what the world is like, understanding that the world was begun and put in place because Yahweh God wanted to do that, desired to do that, created it for that purpose, right? And so an ancient culture might realize the truthfulness of, if you drop something, it's going to fall. They might know that's the case, but because of the Yahweh glasses, because of the God-shaped glasses that we put on, we can know that the reason why this drops is because, yes, gravity, but who initiated gravity? Who created gravity? Who is behind all of these things? And that's God. And so I think that's the step that we need not to forget when we come to biblical literature. Yes, much of it is very similar to what we see in the ancient world around, just like we might see a lot of biblical truths in our neighbors who aren't Christians. That might be really true. They might be living their life in very wise ways, even giving to other people, right? But at the end of the day, you have to ask, what's behind that, right? Do I give to another person because I love God? Or am I giving to another person maybe because it makes me feel better about myself? Or I feel like that's what I have to do in society, right? Those are motivations, right? Are major differences in how we look at the world. They expose those things to us.
And is that bad? And it sounds like a weird question, but I know that people they see the interpretation, the inspiration of the Bible as I don't know, in a purist way. I don't know if that isn't a word in English. When they go to this point where they realize that there are connections between what we read in the Bible and ancient literature, they get offended. So it's bad that there's connection between what the Bible says and what other people wrote around them.
Yeah, I don't know how else it could be, to be honest with you. So,
That's a great answer, actually.
because God has chosen to speak, right? God has chosen to appear. God has chosen to be incarnate in the world through His Son, and then through the work of His Spirit, right? And so He has chosen to enter into our reality. Of course, the reality that He created, but the reality which is already here. So if God came in to this, let's say we zoomed call with Jesus right now, and He only spoke a language that neither one of us spoke, would that be helpful to us?
No.
Of course not. I mean, we might be trying to figure out the language. We both like languages, so we might be trying to say, is this? Why isn't He speaking ancient Hebrew? We kind of a lot of those questions, right? But it's not going to be helpful to us, right? The reason why God communicates, or how God communicates, is through using human forms. And those human forms work because they're agreed upon by the community, right? And so for God to enter into our reality, to choose to do that of His own free volition, he wasn't forced to. Because He chose to do that, He also chose to use human institutions, human culture, to communicate the truths of that. So if that human culture was so different than everything else that we knew about, it wouldn't communicate to us, right? So that's why I said I don't know how else He could do it, but to use the truths that already existed in the world around them, but not just to say that this and this and this are true, but to say, hey, let me show you more to it than that. Let me show you really what this is all about. And I think that's what He's doing. I don't think that we see in the biblical literature anything that is exactly the same without any changes or augmentation than other scriptures from the ancient world or other writings from the ancient world. What we see is always those writings that are being brought in, and the truthfulness might be said, hey, yeah, this is actually true. But they also say, but be careful because this is actually a part of this that could be wrong. Or this is a different way to think about it. This is what people say, but this is what I'm saying to you, right? Paul does this even in his letters, right? He says, hey, you remember the philosopher said this, and he says, yeah, that's true. Or he says, no, that's not true. And now this is the better way to think about it, right? So he's both using what is generally understood to be true, and also saying, but let's focus this in a different way. Let's think about this through real Christian ways of thinking about it.
Which is pretty rabbinical in so many ways. And people think that Paul, sorry, I say Pablo in Spanish. Paul have this disconnection of his roots in a way that affect even his exegetical insights of the Bible. But when you read the Talmud or other rabbinical literature, Paul is using the same exercise when he is writing and talking to his readers. So there can't be this disconnection. Two more questions, Chip.
Can I add on to that just for a second for you?
Okay, go.
I would say that Jesus is doing the same thing as well, right? Because remember, he's saying, Moses said to you, but I say to you this, right? He's also saying, you've heard it said, but let me tell you this. And what's interesting about this, if you think about that moment, you think about the rabbinic teaching style, where it's a lot of Rabbi so-and-so says this, and then the counterpoint, Rabbi so-and-so says this. One of the things that the crowd said about Jesus is that he teaches as one with authority, right? Which is an interesting comment. We might think it means something, and I'm not saying we're wrong about that, but within that context, what that means, I think, is that he's claiming not just this is what one rabbi says and this is what another rabbi says, but he's saying, hey, this is what I say, and those other rabbis are not right. This is unique truth, right? And so I think that's one of those things where he's working within this framework of sort of point counterpoint, but he's also saying, hey, let me help you know what the right way is. It's not just left up to debate in all cases, but rather this is the focus of that. So I think that's interesting. Anyway.
Yeah. It's interesting, and at the same time shows the connection with the word around.
That's right.
Sometimes we think of the Bible and the people of the Bible as, living in a bubble up there. is not in the way they live and the way that is expressed in the Bible show us that they were actually normal people, and they live sometimes in weird ways.
Yes,
that we are not expecting them to live. So
right.
A couple more questions. One, to recap, how these books speak to us today, how the wisdom books speak to us today. We have talked about that through the podcast here and there, but in a few words, how can you say that?
I think that wisdom helps me, if I'm talking about on a personal level here, see that there's order in the world. There are principles of life that work better and don't work so well. And that God is concerned about our lives, and he cares about who we are and us having success in the world. And the way we have success is to know him well and to know his world well. All right. So that's what's going on. And sometimes Christians, modern Christians particularly, can make the Bible into all about this head knowledge and these thoughts, right? But the wisdom literature is so wonderful to me because it says, hey, no, God is concerned about who you are, how you're living today, and how you're affecting those neighbors who are living next to you. And so there's not just a responsibility for us to think the right thoughts about God, but that's the knowledge, information part, but there's also responsibility for how I live my life in relation to others around me. That's the skill part. And then there's also responsibility to me as a Christian to live righteously in life. That means that I need to think about others as much at the minimum or more than I think about myself and this. Mm-hmm. How is my action affecting my neighbors, right? And for me, that's everything. That's what God is doing in the world. That's what it's all about, right? That's what we see the ministry of Jesus is, the ministry of Paul was, the ministry of God is to us, is those things, helping us understand better the world, helping us live better in the here and now, and live in a righteous way so that we can love God and love our neighbor better. And I that's everything to me,
It is. And a final question, something that we want to motivate through this podcast is for people to have, to be inspired to go deeper in biblical studies, not necessarily in an academic way, but is that, I don't know, expose that is not just the study of theology. It's like the study of the Bible in a more objective way. How would you motivate someone to go deeper in biblical languages or archaeology or culture of the Bible? It's a crazy question, but
yeah. How to do it, but don't do it as an academic. I think that's a really interesting question. No, I think it's a good
not
question.
necessarily. I think and it's a personal opinion. I think that the academic needs some missionaries too, in biblical studies specifically.
Sure.
And you know maybe more about that than me, but you can tell it as an academic too. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think for someone who's interested in these things, someone who hears this and says, "Wow, I hadn't really thought about that way." That's a different way of looking at it. I would encourage you to say, exactly. There are different ways to look at these things, and there's some really wise leaders in the church and in the academia who know about these things and are writing and talking about these things. And so I would say, like many things, go and look for people that you can apprentice with, right? Go, and whether that means that you have a personal relationship with them or not, doesn't really matter. Go and find the people that are doing the sorts of things in these realms that get you excited, that you have access to. Find someone who's also reading along with you, and do that together, right? And really find those individuals that help you see the Bible and see the world in new ways, and try to latch on to those individuals. One of the things that's amazing, I think, about our modern moment is that we have access to people all over the world from our mobile phones, right? Mm-hmm. And so, if I'm interested in something, or if I have a question about something, which I do all the time, I oftentimes will get on Twitter or get on the internet and start trying to figure out who's who and who's where. And it's interesting to me how many people I've been able to connect with. Faust is one of them, right? And saying, listen, hey, this is someone I'm really interested in knowing about his ministry and what he's doing, or knowing about what's going on with her archaeological dig over there. I'm interested in that city because I read about it in the Bible. I found that was really intriguing. And then the amazing part is that most of these people may seem like some type of, they may be very smart, they might be very well accomplished, but if they're out there, they have an email address, they have a Twitter account, they have an Instagram account, send them a message, ask them a question, engage with these individuals. And some people will react negatively and they're not interested in that. They're more about sort of building a platform, like some people are. Mm-hmm. But a lot of these people are not, someone who's untouchable and someone who's inaccessible, right? I know that you had an opportunity to dig with probably the most famous archaeologists of this generation, right? In the last couple summers. And and you saw that, Dr. Israel Finkelstein is a great, accessible person, willing to talk, willing to email, and that many of these people want to talk about these things and want to share what they've learned. It's a rare person who says, I'm doing all this knowledge and learning all these knowledges and all this knowledge and learning this wisdom, and I'm going to keep it to myself, right? It's interesting that wisdom and knowledge oftentimes is the thing we want to share. And so I would encourage people just to reach out to those who they've been impacted by and ask questions and seek after opportunities to listen to them, listen to podcasts and listen to videos. And it's just, there's so much that's out there that's helpful. And then don't stop there. Then once you've done that, now you become that person that
Mhm.
needs to share with your friends and your neighbors and your brothers and sisters in the Lord about the things you're learning. So don't just be a sponge to soak everything up, but look for opportunities where you can then take that and and as a community sort of think about what does this mean for us. I'm always scared of the person who just brings in a lot of knowledge and never shares anything,
Mhm.
never allows their ideas to be challenged. Right? We in learning, we always have to do that. We always have to have friends who are there to help us say, have you thought about it this way? Or I was learning this thing today, and those little small communities. Whether it's at church or small groups or whatever it is, are incredible places that we can learn from one another, get excited about learning about the Lord, learning about the scriptures, learning about the ancient world. So I just encourage you to, to do those things and engage in that way.
Yeah, that's a good advice. I haven't thought about that. And as you say, most of the people are reachable and humble
Yeah,
at the same time. And even though they have a lot of stuff to do, that they
sure.
can answer you, and you have information from the source.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's a great advice. Chip.
What other, I want to hear your answer to that last question though, Fausto, before you let me go. I'm sorry to make you. I can't let you off the hook. We're asking me all the great questions. I want to know what you think.
Oh
How's the best
wow.
way for
So now
someone
you're putting me
to?
on the spot.
I am. Yeah, yeah. That's.
Yeah, well, I haven't thought about that, as you say, but it is something that I have done, like getting in contact with people like you or Peter Williams, for example, or uh, the same Israel, other friends like Esteban Both and Marlon Winnet. Um, but at the same time, I think that I recommend the people to go deeper on biblical languages too, especially Hebrew, but Hebrew and Greek. And there's a lot of resources now, like that they weren't even available 10 years ago when they studied. So now is a great time, and you can learn the language as you learn other stuff, and you may not go to the point, although I recommend the people to go to that point of reading the Bible daily in the original languages, but you go to the point where you can do exegesis and you can do analysis, and I'd say from that point on you get interested in the culture of the Bible, because you notice as you are reading that, okay, this doesn't sound like a translation that I have read. What is happening here? This really happened in the Bible? Like, did people add buying and selling as we add today when we go to the market?
Yeah.
Uh, so I find that the biblical language is a great way, especially reading, a great way to go deeper and deeper into the word of the Bible, the biblical studies. So that's something that I would recommend, which with what you already recommend. So, and I think that we need more people doing this professionally. I mean, even though they're planning to be pastors or missionaries or anything, we need more people with knowledge of biblical studies, not just theology. Especially in Latin America, one of the reasons we're doing bad theology is because we don't have a good foundation on biblical studies. So, so I would recommend the people that are listening to this and watching us in YouTube to read more about what is biblical studies, what is estudios bíblicos, so you can understand what is the difference between that and theology.
Mucho gusto.
You got me on the spot, but
I like
that's
it.
something I can say now. Okay, Chip, final words to the people that are listening to us.
Um, I don't know. Go and be wise. Go and learn what it means to be wise. Fear the Lord. It's the beginning of wisdom. So start there.
Yes, nice. Chip, thank you very much. This has been really wonderful. I hope we can have you a couple more times here in the podcast, and we're really thankful for your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your friendship, Fausto.
Thank you for your friendship too. That's something that I really appreciate, for real. Ok, my friend, Dios te bendiga. Gente, esto ha sido todo por hoy. Es un placer. Yo sé que han aprendido muchísimo y han visto cosas en una forma diferente a como quizás la veían anteriormente. A mí mismo me ha hecho pensar muchísimo sobre algunas cosas. Y qué bueno que estamos yendo por este recorrido de toda la Biblia. No abandones, hay mucho más. Dios te bendiga.